here's a leader who's mocking the gods of his ancestors, mocking the God of gods, and exalting himself above them. Could this be the Antichrist? And he said, I sent it out, but it wasn't me as Jesus, though obviously it is. It was me as a doctor. But that's clearly what this is. This is mockery of God by a temporal leader, by a man.
Donald Trump's warped and, let's just say, idiotic burn all bridges down PR strategy continued this week as he mocked Christianity. This coming after he put Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, and Megyn Kelly under the bus, smeared Joe Kent, continued an unpopular war in Iran, and also tried to extend FISA 702. What does this mean? That he put himself in this meme representing Christ, lied about it, said it depicted him as a doctor, and who concocted this idiotic strategy to pitch to Americans, many of which are already jumping off the Trump MAGA bandwagon? Tucker breaks that down right here. Let's take a look at what he has to say about it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Donald Trump is a famously irreligious man, just not that interested, basically secular, a product of his time and place. If you doubt that, some of the funniest clips ever of Donald Trump, and this is not a criticism, they're legit funny, are him being interviewed during the 2016 campaign and asked basic questions like, what's your favorite book of the Bible? To which he says, with some confusion, well, the Bible, maybe unaware there are component books to it. So Donald Trump is not someone who traditionally, or ever really, has weighed in on questions of faith or theology. He kind of gives it a pass, sort of smiles. Yeah, I'm for it. I'm for it. The Bible. But in the space of 1 week, Donald Trump, the same famously irreligious Donald Trump, has weighed in pretty specific ways on matters of faith and theology and religion publicly in ways that are disruptive and sort of hard to understand, but worth trying to understand. So all of this began about 10 days ago on Easter Sunday, early on Easter Sunday, before 9 a.m. on Easter Sunday, when Trump tweeted that he was planning on destroying civilian infrastructure in Iran. It was going to be bridge and power plant day, basically promising war crimes, crimes against civilians, against the population of the country. And then in that same tweet or truth, he used the F word on Easter Sunday, and then he seemed to make fun of Islam. Praise Allah, he said. So in one short statement of about 110 words, he seemed to give the finger to the world's two largest religions, Christianity and Islam.
And beyond that, he's on a pure tear, smearing Joe Kent and chiding him for his wife dying in 2017 under the watch of Trump. Like I said, throwing some of his biggest supporters, former supporters, I should say, under the bus. Tucker, Candace, Alex Jones, Megyn Kelly, promising to end a civilization, saying praise be to Allah, using the F-bomb on Truth Social too, and then mocking Christianity. He's really on a tear. It actually seems like it's impossible to have PR this bad. He's trying to burn every single last bridge, and it doesn't seem to be benefiting him in any way whatsoever. So if this isn't self-sabotage, it really seems indistinguishable from that. I mean, he's sabotaging himself with these unpopular policies, but this isn't even, C-tier propaganda to support those policies. This is just self-destruct mode. It's really incredible to watch.
That was Sunday. And then exactly 1 week later, also on Sunday, the Christian holy day, he attacked the Pope, the leader of the world's largest religion and largest Christian denomination, and attacked him personally and said basically he's only Pope because of me. He's bad. The Pope is bad. And then later that day, maybe most interestingly, bafflingly of all, he sent out this meme. Take a look at this. Now, there are two on the screen. The one on the right is the one that he sent out, and it's himself. It's Donald Trump, President of the United States, dressed as Jesus, healing a man. And you can see the healing power coming off of his right hand. Now, the image on the left of your screen is the original image, and it was floating around the internet. Who knows exactly where it came from, but it's been there for quite some time. The one on the right is the one the president sent out, White House Communications Office or whoever does this, sent out, and you'll notice that it's been changed. And the American soldier over the president's head, the president as Jesus' head, has been changed and is now, if you look very carefully, a demon, some kind of winged creature of hell.
That's not a demon. That's not a winged creature of hell. That's just doctor stuff. Isn't that the Red Cross logo now? Yeah, that's connected to the Red Cross. This has nothing to do with demonic impulses. Guys, this is what they're trying to sell you. It's incredible. And, there's no excuse for it. Trump lied about this later and said, hey, this depicts me as a doctor. Yeah, the rays of light that come from the hands of doctors and people praying to the side, and you have him in garb that doesn't exactly match that of Scrubs or that of a doctor or that of a Red Cross standard issue garb. It's so preposterous that they want you to swallow this and then have no explanation for that, for changing this. What does it mean? It's just doctor stuff. That's literally what they're going with.
So it goes from an image that suggests, healing and light to an image that suggests, I don't know, a scene from Revelation, John's vision on the Isle of Patmos, the end times, the apocalypse, who knows? Nothing good. It suggests demonic power because there is a demon in it. So he sent that out and then withdrew it, deleted the tweet from the internet after an outcry, but was asked about it. And he said, yeah, I sent that. Didn't explain how the demon got in there. Someone at the White House put it in. Didn't explain why. And he said, I sent it out, but it wasn't me as Jesus, though obviously it is. It was me as a doctor because I heal people. Jesus, of course, basically described himself as a doctor, someone who came for the sick to heal them, which he did. So maybe a distinction without a difference, but still kind of confusing.
It's absolutely absurd because it doesn't explain why you removed it, though. There was a big outcry from Christians and even non-Christians that would see this as preposterous if you're likening a temporal president, a temporal representative of the people. Supposedly he's not that. He really is a warlord and a overseer and a tyrant. All presidents in my lifetime have been. And liken him to the Christian savior. That's a big support base of his, is Christians of all kinds. And he said, it depicts me as a doctor. Well, why did they remove it then? That is what they failed to explain. It's obvious why you removed it. This was sacrilegious. This was blasphemy in the eyes of a vast cross-section of your supporters. Just tell the truth. Lying about this even makes it worse and more people to jump off the MAGA train, knowing that this stooge is either getting the worst PR advice in the world or is engaging in some form of self-sabotage. Now, I think he did that with the Epstein scandal and with launching this war against Iran. But when you lie about it, it actually makes it more visible. It actually makes it worse in many ways.
And then today, a day later, was asked about it again. And he said, no, I didn't have anything to do with that. I didn't send it out. Which wasn't exactly an answer to the question. Even more confusing. What was that? And then, to make it even further mysterious, sent out this meme on Truth Social, retweeting somebody else, and it's him, Donald Trump, being, I don't know, how would you describe that? Caressed by? Healed by? Maybe endorsed by Jesus. That's unmistakably Jesus, the Christian Messiah, the man God at the center of Christianity, with his arm around Donald Trump, basically saying, you go Trump, I'm on your side. So all of that in a little over a week. What does it mean? Because it certainly means something. This isn't so much a couple of memes. These are icons. This is iconography.
Yeah, try doing this with Muslim religious symbology too, or Jewish symbolic pictures depicted that way. That would be completely skewered. It would be completely reviled, and there'd be probably protests on the streets. The Israel lobby wouldn't exactly necessarily want Trump depicting himself as Moses, or even their hero Netanyahu now, in terms of the right-wingers that are supporting the genocide in Gaza and in Iran. It's absolutely insane that this is what's going to be presented to Americans as if it's good messaging. And, the Pope's not untouchable. Trump can criticize the Pope, but he has to realize when you criticize the Pope for having the most reasonable take against the killing of innocents, the slaughter of innocents, the atrocities against innocents, which he's talked about on all sides of the Israeli conflict, by the way, it doesn't make you look as good as if the Pope weighs into, say, immigration, which Catholics and, Christians in general are generally split on, compared to mass atrocities against, say, children. When he makes those reasonable takes and you go against the Pope, it's not in the same category as if he has a different immigration policy that divides the catechism. That is what is going on here. And it's so backward for Trump to do it. It's so counterintuitive and contradictory from any strategy that would be, building bridges, making amends, trying to reconcile with supporters he may have lost along the way. It's just backward, but that's what this presidency has become. It's a downward spiral, truly. Monetary-metals.com/vault for monetary metals, because if you care about liberty and sound money, then you probably already understand why gold matters. It's preserved purchasing power over thousands of years while governments debase paper currency. But most people think about gold as something you store away in a vault and forget about, but that just means your gold sits there doing nothing. And that's where Monetary Metals steps in. They built a system where you can earn yield on your gold paid in gold. So instead of selling your gold for dollars to invest, you can keep your wealth in gold and still earn a return. Depending on the opportunity, clients can earn up to about 4% yield in gold paid in more gold. Monetary Metals offers gold owners a way to put their metal into productive use instead of relying on the fiat financial system. It's the perfect hedge against inflation. So if you already own gold or you're thinking about owning some, this is well worth looking into. Monetary-metals.com/vault to learn how you can start earning a return on your gold. Monetary Metals has my full enthusiastic endorsement. It's the ultimate lifeline to protect yourself against the corrupt financial system. Now let's get back into the conversation.
These are attempts to send a statement about faith. What statement is the president sending? Well, not a coherent one. Doesn't actually add up to a theology. It's mockery. He's mocking Jesus. He's making fun of Christianity. The central figure of the religion is being held up for mockery, of course. And his description of how this got out is itself mockery of the idea of truth. One day he says, yeah, I did it. Next day he says, no, I didn't do it. Both are on video. That's not really a lie. It's more than a lie. It's bigger than a lie. It's an attack not just on a specific set of facts. It's an attack on the idea that there are facts. It's an attack on truth. Openly. No one's hiding this. So this was kind of dismissed after a online kerfuffle for a few hours, and people were outraged, and then they weren't, and we've got other things to worry about. They moved on. But for sincere religious people, for Christians who care about Jesus and what's true and what's not, a lot of them went to their Bibles to try and figure out, what are we watching here? And a lot of them came up with a couple of verses that seemed to fit what we're watching.
Yeah, they did. And in terms of Christian theology, there's one unforgivable sin. And all the synoptic gospels talk about this, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And that's blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. And what does that mean? Well, the context of those passages seem to indicate it's to attribute the miraculous works of Christ in healing the sick and, doing the miracles that Christ did to demons, to Satan, to attribute that to a force that isn't that of God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Well, that appears to me to be what's being done here, is that healing the sick through miraculous power, and even putting a demonic image above the depiction, it really seems to be blasphemic, or at least related to this, or possibly flirting with that notion that Trump is committing the unforgivable sin that's denoted in those three synoptic gospels, in all three of them. That's just was my gut when I saw this playing out. but maybe it was a calculated attempt to put him in that position. I mean, obviously they thought that this PR, was wrong. Otherwise they wouldn't have removed the image, but they continued to lie about it. Yeah. Red Cross doctor. That's what this was.
And if you are a sincere Christian or know some, maybe you got these texted to you, but we'll read them just so you know how a lot of people of faith were interpreting this. The first is from Paul's second letter to the Thessalonians, the church of Thessalonica, chapter 2, a very well-known verse in which he's describing what's going to happen when Jesus comes back. And he says, you're going to hear that Jesus is coming back. Don't believe what you hear. A bunch of things have to happen before he returns to earth, redeems the world, history ends. And you'll know that he's coming by these events. And among them will be the rise of a figure he describes as the man of lawlessness, sometimes describes as the Antichrist. But the man of lawlessness is the phrase from his second letter to the Thessalonians. And he says this, there will be a great rebellion against God, led by that man of lawlessness. This man, quote, will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. He will pose as God. He will mock other gods and put himself in their place. That's from the second letter to the Thessalonians. But that's not the first place in the Bible, Old and New Testaments, where something like this is described. Variations of this are in a number of prophecies in what Christians call the Old Testament, including those contained in the book of Daniel. The prophet Daniel describes something very much like this at the end of history, and he's describing this period, really, as is so often described in the prophets, as punishment for faithlessness and sin. God's people are being punished for not following God. And that punishment, he describes in part in chapter 11 from the book of Daniel, predicts the coming of a king, and we're quoting now, a king who will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. It's all ordained, in other words, preordained. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all.
Well, that sure seems to meet the criteria of lots of historical figures, lots, whether they be kings or presidents or prime ministers, etc., exalting themselves above God, not answering to God, if you ask me. Certainly so. It might match some of the things that Trump is doing, but there's a heck of a lot of people that would probably qualify under these criteria, is what I'd say.
So to a lot of Christians, or people who know the Bible well and believe in it, these predictions in both the Old and the New Testament, and there are others, seem to fit what we were watching. Here's a leader who's mocking the gods of his ancestors, mocking the God of gods, and exalting himself above them. Could this be the Antichrist? Well, who knows?
He's sure letting it hang out there a little bit, though. Could this be the Antichrist? I don't know, Tucker. I think Peter Thiel would like a word with you on this one. I thought that was Peter Thiel that's the Antichrist. He's going to get jealous if you keep flirting with the notion that Trump may in fact be the Antichrist. So, I don't know, man. Don't get into fisticuffs with Peter Thiel over this one.
At least that's my conclusion. Who knows? We're also told repeatedly in the New Testament that you're not going to know that Jesus will return like a thief in the night, and you better be ready because you can't predict it. But we're also told there are signs, and is this one of them? Well, again, unclear. This, by the way, fits the behavior of other leaders throughout history who saw themselves in a kind of rivalry with the gods of their people and sought to put themselves over those gods, exalt themselves above God.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's what I would say. But what is clear about this, even if, pinpointing the Antichrist is unclear, which I think it clearly is unclear, I just wanted to be a fly in the wall in the conference room of the messaging department or the marketing department of the Trump administration to see who concocted this idea, how it was passed around, if anyone had any reservations to put this out. because it's just truly unfathomable for me to believe that this went through any quality check, any kind of approval process that would lead people to believe that this was going to be a winner, that this was going to be the messaging that the president needs straight after, deriding Joe Kent for telling the truth about the Iran war, throwing his biggest podcast supporters on the right under the bus, and by proxy, probably eliminating a lot of their audience that was previous followers of Trump and now will not be, just by that, whether we like it or not, deriding the Pope, denouncing anyone that questions Trump's allegiance to the United States when it seems like he has more allegiance to Israel and Netanyahu and doing the bidding of the Israel lobby in the United States for that twisted purpose, even when he made his cornerstone mantra, America first. That's what I want to know. I just don't see how anyone could have approved this unless they're complicit in the sabotage. It's absurd. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this play out in my lifetime.
That's actually pretty common. That is really the definition of megalomania. And it's happened before and will doubtless happen again. But that's clearly what this is. This is mockery of God by a temporal leader, by a man. This is the leader of our country saying, I will take no instruction from God because, as he showed in the first meme, I am God. Okay. So that kind of raises the question, is that okay? Seems to be okay. There were no massive protests in front of the White House. There was no attempt really to do anything about this. In fact, many Republican leaders shrugged it off. Self-professed Christians shrugged off. No big deal. He's just true socialing. Don't pay attention. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. What, do you have no sense of humor? Mocking Jesus? Giving the finger to God? You're so uptight. And as for his attacks on the Pope, Republican leader after Republican leader, including just hours ago, the Speaker of the House, the self-described Christian, fervent Christian, Bible scholar, joined in attacking the Pope.
Yeah, not only joined in, but some of them just said, yeah, the Pope should stay out of moral questions, as if wars and atrocities against innocents aren't moral questions. Like, that's the big problem here, is that the politicians, the leadership class, the ruling class of sorts, has successfully made this idea and divided the idea of politics from morality and said, hey, if politicians engage in behaviors that would be immoral if you did it, that's just fine. That's exactly what the IRS does when they seize our wealth. That's exactly what the warmongers do when they enact mass atrocities against innocents right now in Iran. Thousands of people dead. Well, if you killed thousands of people, you'd be behind bars. It's a moral question whether or not you have a government badge, whether or not you have a monopoly on force from the state through coercive power. That's exactly what the state is. So politicians have convinced you that there's just this dividing line between morality and politics. And really, the truth is that the reason why a lot of people get active in politics, care so much about politics, is violation of basic moral tenets. That's just the truth here. And look, it's just so utterly absurd here. So I've said it a few times in this video. It's hard for me to even believe that this video made it through an approval process. And I know the uniparty often acts in concert. They do the same things. We have the same welfare state, the same extortion state, same warfare state, same regulatory state. Most of our policies are not going to budge very much, despite all the theatrics around them, as if it's a clash of ideologies between the Republicans and Democrats. But at the same time, if I was a Democratic operative and I really wanted the Democrats to win, this is the exact strategy I would employ for Donald Trump. This is what I would do. I would have him throw his biggest supporters with the biggest audiences under the bus, call them losers, call them idiots, say Brigitte Macron was more attractive than Candace Owens. I'd smear Joe Kent, a decorated war hero and gold star husband who lost his wife under a war that Trump started. I'd smear him all day. I'd denounce the Pope, who's not untouchable, but I'd denounce him on the grounds of something essentially all Christians believe in. Even if they don't act this way, they do claim to believe that they're against the death of mass innocents. That's what they would say. Not on wedge issues like immigration, where, you know, many people in the catechism are divided. I'd attack the Pope on something that's universally agreed to by basically all Christians. Then I'd put myself in the image of Christ. I'd put myself in the image of a meme like this, then lie about it twice after removing it for obvious reasons, continuing to lie about it, and I'd continue this war in Iran. I'd make, you know, absurd excuses for continuing it, trying to pitch it as America first. That's exactly what I would do if I was a Democratic operative. So it seems like Trump is just handing the midterms, handing the next presidency over to the Democrats on a silver platter. Now, again, I think the Democrats and Republicans, they have some differences, especially on cultural lines and on some wedge issues, abortion, guns, immigration. But overall, again, the policies that they enact from Washington are largely just variants of the same policies, where it's not a question of how much wealth, that whether wealth is going to be extracted in the form of an income tax. It's just whether it's 35% or 37% at the top bracket. It's not a question of whether we will bomb other countries. It's just a question of which countries we will bomb, which countries we will get in wars with, etc. But it really seems like Trump is acting in a manner where he's just handing it over to the Democrats. He's just willing to go down on this sunken ship. And I said sunken ship, not just sinking ship, because I believe it's truly sunken, with so many people, especially younger people, peeling off this coalition, especially independents, Maha people, libertarians, dissidents, that, you know, held their nose and voted for Trump because they thought he would be better than Harris, and them getting betrayed in so many ways. This is not to promote Harris whatsoever. She was a deep state shill and a total charlatan and fraud, despite being, you know, primed as the next deep state puppet. But I'm just saying it didn't pay off the way that many people thought. And you can see a lot of people jumping ship for this. So I think this was a good analysis. It just seems to be the worst PR from a president in my entire lifetime that I've seen. I'm 42 years old. I'm almost 43. But at the same time, yeah, I can't think of a strategy that's more contradictory, more counterintuitive, and more just, you know, don't give an F attitude than this strategy. It doesn't make sense at all. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Tucker Carlson. Also, if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below, and that gets you immediate access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to be privy to all of my videos before they go live to the general public, and I appreciate your support if you do that. Also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description down below. That'll send you off to a website. Just plug in your email right there, and I'll send you a full free copy of that book. No obligation whatsoever. And look, I have a few demands from the sinister Israel First, blasphemous Epstein class regime, and I won't apologize for them. No more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.